There are two types of men in this world. The first type needs constant reassurance. He checks how many likes his posts got. He waits for approval from his boss, his partner, his friends. His mood depends entirely on how others treat him that day. His entire sense of self-worth is built on external validation that can be taken away at any moment. Then there's the second type. He doesn't post. He doesn't wait. He doesn't need your validation to know his worth. And society absolutely cannot stand him. If you've ever been called cold, distant, or too independent, this isn't about what's wrong with you. This is about what you figured out that most men spend their entire lives never understanding. You discovered that the moment you stop needing others, you become impossible to control. And in a world built on controlling men through their insecurities, that makes you dangerous. Let's talk about the invisible contract every man signs without realizing it. From the time you're a child, you're taught a simple equation. Your value equals your utility plus your status. It's not just about relationships with women, though that's part of it. It's everything. The school system teaches you to be a good student, which really means seek approval from authority figures. The workplace teaches you to climb the hierarchy, which means your worth is measured by where you rank compared to other men. Relationships teach you to prove your value, which means constant performance, constant validation seeking, constant fear that you're not enough. Most men never question this. They build their entire identity on a foundation of external validation. They need their parents to be proud. They need their friends to think they're successful. They need women to find them attractive. They need their boss to recognize their worth. And every single one of those needs is a chain. Every single one is a point of control. Here's what society doesn't want you to realize. The entire economic system depends on men being insecure. Think about it. Marketing to men is almost entirely built on selling status. Buy this car to impress people. Wear this watch to signal wealth. Go to this restaurant to be seen. Get this degree to prove you're smart. The consumption economy needs men who are trying to prove something. A man who doesn't need to prove anything doesn't buy much. He's a terrible consumer. The dating industry is a $5 billion per year business built almost entirely on male insecurity. Dating apps, pickup courses, self-improvement programs. A man who's comfortable alone, who doesn't need romantic validation to feel complete. That man isn't paying for premium subscriptions. That man isn't buying the products being sold. And if enough men figured this out, entire industries would collapse. But it goes deeper than economics. There's a social hierarchy that depends on men competing with each other. At the top, you've got men with status, money, power, fame. In the middle, you've got men competing to climb higher. At the bottom, men who've given up but are still in the game. And then there's a fourth category that terrifies the system. Men who've stepped outside the pyramid entirely. Men who aren't competing because they don't accept that the game matters. The pyramid needs everyone to believe that climbing is the point of existence. When a man opts out, he doesn't just leave. He reveals that leaving is possible. And if enough men realize the pyramid is optional, the entire structure loses meaning. That's the real threat. Not that one man becomes independent, but that his independence reminds others that they could be free too. Marcus Aurelius understood this 2,000 years ago. Here was a man who had absolute power, emperor of Rome. He could have anything, anyone. And what did he write in his private journals? You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The most powerful man in the ancient world knew that real power wasn't external, it was internal. Men who depend on external validation are slaves even when they sit on thrones. Freedom begins when you stop needing an audience. Nietzsche said it even more directly. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. The tribe, modern society, whatever you want to call it, offers you belonging in exchange for obedience. It says you can be part of something bigger than yourself, but only if you follow the rules seek the right approvals, want the right things. The man who refuses that bargain becomes a threat, not because he's better, but because he's free. And free men make enslaved men uncomfortable. Now let's be clear about what creates this kind of man, because this isn't about some fantasy Sigma male archetype. This is psychology, real developmental patterns. Most men who become genuinely self-sufficient didn't choose it as a lifestyle philosophy. They learned it through necessity, through pain. There's a concept in psychology called attachment theory. John Bowlby spent decades studying how early relationships shape adult behavior. One of the patterns he identified is avoidant attachment. These are people who learned early that depending on others leads to disappointment. So they develop a strategy. If I don't need anyone, I can't be hurt by anyone. It's not a conscious choice at first. It's survival. Think about the origins. Maybe your father was emotionally unavailable. Maybe your mother was inconsistent, loving one day and critical the next. Maybe you experienced a betrayal in a formative relationship that taught you people leave. Maybe you showed vulnerability as a kid and got bullied for it. Whatever the specific trigger, the lesson was the same. Depending on people is dangerous. So you built a fortress, not a physical one, a psychological one. You developed hobbies you could do alone. You learned practical skills so you wouldn't need to ask for help. You constructed a life that functioned without emotional dependencies. This isn't isolation. It's architecture. You're not hiding from the world. You're building a foundation that can't be shaken by whether someone stays or leaves. And then something interesting happens. You discover that chosen solitude feels completely different from forced loneliness. Loneliness is when you're alone and you hate it, when you feel like something's missing, when you're incomplete. But chosen solitude, that's different. That's peace. That's the first time you feel truly safe, because your well-being doesn't depend on anyone else's mood, anyone else's choices, anyone else's presence. This creates 3 specific psychological characteristics. First, you develop what psychologists call an internal locus of control. That's the belief that you control your own destiny. The opposite is an external locus of control, where you constantly blame or credit outside forces for everything that happens to you. A man with internal locus of control thinks, my peace depends on me, not on who stays or leaves. That's not arrogance. That's emotional responsibility. Second, you develop a low need for approval. Maslow's hierarchy of needs says you need belonging before you can achieve self-actualization. But men like this invert that pyramid. They achieve self-actualization first, and that generates selective belonging. They don't seek friends. They attract people who are compatible with who they already are. The difference is brutal. It's the difference between choosing and needing. Third, you become comfortable with solitude. Studies show that 60% of people can't be alone for 15 minutes without seeking distraction. They'll scroll their phone, turn on the TV, do anything to avoid being alone with their thoughts. A self-sufficient man can go hours, days alone without anxiety. Why? Because he made peace with his own mind. He faced his demons alone and came out the other side. He doesn't need to run from himself anymore. But let's be very clear about what this is not. This is not misanthropy. It's not hating people. It's not thinking you're better than everyone. It's not psychopathy or lack of empathy. It's not some autistic inability to connect. What it actually is selectivity, quality over quantity. It's discretion. You don't need to narrate your entire life to strangers. It's authenticity. You don't perform a fake version of yourself to be accepted. And it's inner peace. Your emotional state doesn't depend on external chaos. Now here's where it gets threatening, because this kind of man breaks multiple systems of control simultaneously. Let's start with economic control. The entire consumer economy is built on manufactured insecurity. Men are sold products they don't need to impress people they don't like. A self-sufficient man doesn't buy a $10,000 watch to prove his worth. He doesn't trade his car every year to maintain an image. He doesn't go to expensive places just to be seen. He's not trying to signal anything. And when you remove that motivation, an entire economy loses a customer. Look at the dating app industry specifically. $5 billion a year built on men paying to increase their chances, men buying premium features because they're desperate for matches, men convinced that the algorithm is the only way to meet someone. A man who doesn't need romantic validation to feel complete doesn't participate in that system. He's not paying for boosts. He's not optimizing his profile. He's not checking the app every hour. If enough men became genuinely comfortable being alone, that industry would collapse overnight. Then there's social control. Every hierarchy depends on people believing that climbing it matters. In the male social hierarchy, there are men at the top with status. And then there's the man outside the pyramid entirely. He's not competing because he doesn't accept the premise that status games matter. That's what makes him dangerous. Not that he left, but that his existence proves leaving is possible. Political systems need predictable masses. Democracy as it functions today depends on people forming tribal identities and competing with other tribes. Politicians manipulate through belonging. You're on this team or that team. You're right or they're right. A man who doesn't identify with any tribe, who thinks for himself, who can't be mobilized through group identity, that man is politically unpredictable. And unpredictable people are threats to systems built on predictability. Even in relationships, this creates a power shift. Most modern relationships are built on codependency. Two people who need each other confuse that need with love. And in any dynamic, power flows to whoever needs the relationship less. A self-sufficient man in a relationship is there by choice, not necessity. He doesn't tolerate disrespect because he's afraid of being alone. He doesn't accept emotional scraps. He doesn't stay in something mediocre out of fear. The relationship is either healthy or it ends. There's no prolonged agony, no settling, no quiet desperation. And that threatens everyone around him because it exposes how many relationships survive purely on fear of loneliness. Now let's talk about the real cost. Because I'm not going to sell you some fantasy. There is a price for this kind of independence, and you need to know what it is before you commit to this path. First, you will lose friends. Not through conflict necessarily, through incompatibility. Friendships based on going out to forget your problems die when you solve your problems. Friendships based on mutual validation of insecurity die when you're no longer insecure. What's left is very few people, but the ones who remain are real. You're going to feel grief about this. You'll miss the old version of yourself. The version that had 20 surface-level friends. The version that got invited to everything. The version that everyone liked because that version never challenged anyone, never had strong opinions, never made anyone uncomfortable. That version was easy to be around. And letting that version die will feel like a loss even though you know it was a performance. Your family won't understand. They'll say you've changed, and they'll mean it as an accusation. You're too serious now, too distant, too cold. What they're really saying is you're not performing the role we expected from you anymore. Your father, who never respected you when you were vulnerable, will criticize you for being too closed off. Your mother, who taught you to serve everyone else, will punish you for prioritizing yourself. Dating becomes complicated in a different way. Women say they want a self-sufficient man, and some do, but many women want a man who needs them. There's a difference between being independent and being too independent. You'll hear that you're emotionally unavailable, when really, you're just not desperate. Self-sufficiency attracts and repels simultaneously. It attracts mature women who want a partner, not a dependent. It repels women who base their value on being needed. Your dating pool shrinks dramatically, but the quality increases exponentially, and the pressure to conform never stops. Society will constantly try to pull you back. You need to socialize more. You need to get out of your comfort zone. You need to open up. Translation: you need to become controllable again. Every day, you'll face that choice. It would be easier to go back to seeking validation. It's harder to maintain emotional sovereignty. But what's impossible is living with the knowledge that you could be free and you chose to be a slave. So what do you actually gain that makes this worth it? Real immunity to manipulation. Narcissists can't hook you. Manipulation tactics like love bombing and gaslighting don't work. Why? Because you don't need what they're offering. You can walk away at any time without emotional devastation. Your boss threatens to fire you. You've already got plans B, C, and D. The threat has no power. Either he improves how he treats you or you leave. No drama, no desperation. You make decisions based on values instead of fear. A dependent man asks, "What will people think?" A self-sufficient man asks, "Is this aligned with who I am?" Career choices based on what you love, not what impresses people. Relationship choices based on compatibility, not status. Friendships based on loyalty, not networking. You build an authentic existence instead of an Instagram aesthetic, and you get something that's worth more than all of it. Peace of mind. Your peace doesn't depend on whether someone texts back. Your mood doesn't swing with external approval. Your self-worth doesn't change when someone criticizes you. This isn't performative stoicism. This is actual psychological freedom. Marcus Aurelius wrote something near the end of his life that captures this perfectly. Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Happiness isn't in having many friends. It's in not needing many friends. It's not in being admired. It's in not needing admiration. That shift in paradigm changes everything. Look, this path isn't for everyone, and that's fine. Some men are genuinely happy in the social matrix. If you are, truly, stay there. But if you're watching this all the way to the end, you already know the answer. You already know which type of man you are. Here's a question worth sitting with. Do you fear being alone, or do you fear discovering that you prefer being alone? There's a brutal difference between those two. The first is normal human need for connection. The second is an awakening that doesn't have a reverse gear. Try this. 72 hours without seeking external validation. Don't post anything expecting reactions. Don't send messages fishing for specific responses. Don't do anything to be seen, admired, or noticed. Just exist. See how that feels. The answer will tell you everything. Society will keep calling you cold, distant, difficult. You can accept those labels as the price of freedom, or you can go back to performing. The choice is yours. It always was, but now at least you know it's a choice. Drop a comment and tell me, when did you realize you preferred being alone over being with the wrong people? I want to hear your story.